This is Radio TV Phononut, and we have a Speartone Kiddie phonograph from November 1959 based on the date stamp I found. We have it blown apart here, and this was probably about the cheapest Kiddie phonograph that you could buy, and it also brings back a, well, somewhat painful / comical memory for me. Back around 1994, this old guy found out about me. I was a teenager at the time. He comes over here one day with his Speartone phonograph that looked just like this one, although I think his was in a little worse cosmetic shape. And he proceeds to tell me his tale of woe, that he paid $85 for it in an antique shop, and he wanted it for the purpose of playing his 78 RPM records, but it won't work, and he needed me to fix it. Now, I didn't say this out loud because I didn't want to be rude to the guy, but I was thinking to myself, you're about an idiot for paying $85 for a cheap cardboard-cased Kiddie record player, especially one that doesn't even work. At that time, I was picking up such things at garage sales and church rummage sales for $1. But I didn't say nothing. I tried to appease the guy. I checked the thing out, and about everything that could be wrong was wrong. The cartridge was bad. The filter cap was bad. The audio output transformer had an open winding. I think the idler wheel was bad. Well, at that particular time, phono repair parts weren't as expensive as they are now, and I had a good bit of junk on hand, and I offered to fix the thing for him for, I don't remember, 25 or 30 bucks, basically the cost of what I was going to have to spend on it. He evermore threw a fit. No, that's too much money. I can't put that much in it. I was afraid it was going to be something like that, and I said, well, if you don't want to fool with that, I've got this nice sound design all-in-one system from the 70s. It's got a BSR record changer in it that'll play your 78s, and I can let you have that for 35 bucks, and he pitched a fit about that. Oh, no, that's highway robbery. Well, at that point, I'd about had enough, and I told him that, sir, I just don't believe I can help you, and you just need to take your record player and go on about your business. Personally, I saw it as a slap in the face. You know, you come to me and tell me that you paid $85 for some junky record player and think I'm going to fix it for nothing. And then when I try to sell you something for a very reasonable price, you think that's too high. I know what his problem was. He expected me to cover for the idiotic purchase that he made, but that's not my problem. Now I wonder if anybody will give me $85 for this once I fix it up. I seriously doubt it, but we'll still try to get it going anyway. Here's the inside. As you can tell, not much to it. I have the cover that goes on the amplifier. I just removed it so we can service it. Just a single 25L6 tube. We know this filter capacitor is most likely bad. And we know the cartridge is most likely bad. This drive mechanism, I can tell the motor was made by Alliance, but this drive mechanism doesn't look like a typical Alliance mechanism. In fact, I've only seen this particular mechanism in Speartone record players. Some of them had the lever like this one's got. The newer ones had a little thumb wheel on the front corner of the record player where you selected speed. And it's interesting that even the tube is branded Spear Products. The EIA number on it indicates it was made by Westinghouse. Tone arm is, of course, made of plastic, and it has a crystal cartridge in it. This was probably one of the last ones to use one of the flat metal crystal cartridges, and it looks like a standard screw mount, so it shouldn't be a problem replacing this with a modern cartridge without me having to get creative in the mounting. I'll probably just put an static 89T in here. It has an output of 1.3 volts, and it's generally hot enough to kick these little one-tube amplifiers without me having to add a preamp stage. It won't be quite as loud as what the original cartridge would be, but the fidelity will be better, and it'll still be loud enough for the average listener. Yeah, the biggest issue is the plastic speed control knob is missing, but it's really no big deal. I can still flip it. Of course, that mechanism needs to be taken apart and cleaned and re-lubricated, but we'll get to all that too. Alright, just for the heck of it, let's see what happens. I hear the motor running. Ah, that sounds lovely, doesn't it? Filter's bad, no cartridge activity. Yeah, the usual stuff. On this one, we may take a different repair approach on. Normally, I fix the amplifier first. On this one, I think I'm going to check out the drive mechanism, because this motor is awfully noisy. And if it has worn bushings and can't be fixed, then there's really no need in messing with the rest of it. I'm going to take it apart and clean it and lubricate it and see if it'll quieten it down a little bit. And then if it does, then we'll get to the amplifier, because we know we can get that fixed. Alright, I got the motor taken apart, cleaned and lubricated. It didn't help it much. This thing just, the bushings are worn just enough to make it noisy. Well, what's wrong with my power plug here? Now, when pressure is applied, like what'll be from the idler wheel, it's quieter, but that motor is rather worn out. This idler wheel looks like the old Alliance wheels that were used on the 78 players, and the rubber's all cracked and dented and deformed, so I'm going to try to find my O-rings and see if I can come up with an O-ring to put on here. And for a cartridge, I'm probably not going to put an 89T in there. This record player is not good enough for that. I'm going to put one of those little $2 cartridges from China in there, and if it's not loud enough, so what? As long as you can hear the music play, that's about all we're worried about, because this thing's pretty well worn out anyway, like most of these little cheap spare tone models that I've found are. And to think that guy paid $85 for a broken one. Why can't I have customers like that? Seems like most everybody that wants to buy something from me expects it to be in pristine working condition, and they expect to get it for $5 or $10. If you wanted 10, they'd probably try to talk you down to 5. Of course, that's the reason I don't try to get rid of anything locally anymore. I just got tired of all that nonsense, so if I want to get rid of something, I just either advertise it on one of the record player groups or radio groups, or put it on eBay, and I usually do a lot better. But still, I wouldn't expect to get $85 for this, even if it was in pristine working condition. Here's my O-ring assortment. I'm going to try to find something that I can put on this old wheel once I strip the old rubber off. And once I put the ring on there, I'll have to put the wheel in the drill and rough it up a little bit with some fine sandpaper. I've done that on some of the 78 RPM idler wheels that I didn't want to spend $30+ on a wheel rebuild, and this thing certainly isn't worth an idler wheel rebuild, so we'll just try to get it going with what we have on hand. You can see this old rubber is just dry rotting and crumbling to pieces. Alright, I stuck an O-ring on here and roughed it up with the sandpaper. I don't know that it's going to be thick enough. It's not as thick as the original rubber that came off of it, but if it'll grip well enough to turn the platter and play a record, then that's all we're worried about. And if it doesn't grip the platter well enough, this thing might very well become a parts unit, because with the motor being a little worn and being an overall cheap record player, it's not worth a lot of time or labor. Well, it's running, but does my O-ring have a bit of a bump in it? Well, if it does, and so what? It's got good torque. But not on 45, though. Just rig this up for a 78 player, because it seems to have the best torque on 78, which makes sense because that's the widest diameter of the motor shaft. Alright, I found an old Sprague Atom dual 40 capacitor. The original was 50-30, but it's not critical. A dual 40 ought to work, and the capacitor checks reasonably well. And I'm not using my new capacitor that I've got money tied up in, which my stock is dwindling on for something like this. So let's fire it up and see if the amplifier works. And of course the old cartridge is dead, but we figured that. Well, I didn't want to have to do this, but this is about the only way I can get any kind of decent results out of this. I dug around and found the last 89 cartridge holder that I had, or let me put it this way, the last one that's easily accessible. And like I said, I hate having to do it because these holders are not exactly common anymore, and when you find them, they're about $12 to $15 a piece. And the cartridges that plug in them are 20 and up unless you find a good deal. The cartridge in here is one that I pulled out of an old school record player that the 78 side still works on, and since this is likely going to be for 78 use only, it doesn't really matter that the other side works. So, and on this one, somebody cut off part of the handle, the flipper handle, so that makes me feel a little better about using it in this junker. Alright, let's get a 78 and see if it'll play it. Alright, there it is, playing a 78. Having to turn it wide open, but like I said, this is not no primo record player here. As long as we can hear the music, that's all I'm worried about. Alright, here we are in neutral, noisy as heck. But it's noise free and when there's a load placed on the motor, except for the bumpy drive wheel. I think one reason why this is as noisy as it is because there's no rubber grommets to isolate the motor from the rest of the mechanism and the motor board. You know, a sign of a cheap mechanism, so what noise the motor makes is going to get transmitted to the motor board and through the rest of the mechanism. So now we're back together, and oh yeah, and I did put a screw there so the speed selector couldn't be moved to any position except neutral and 78. Of course, that can be taken out if somebody ever wanted to fix this properly. I don't really want to. It's not in horrible shape, but it's kind of dinged up a little bit, and I just know as a cheap record player, and I'm just not interested in spending a lot of time or money on this thing. And it sounds pretty good. Somebody wanted a cheap 78 player, this would fit the bill.
Just 2 cigarettes.
Yeah, maybe one day if I can find a grommet that's thick enough to put on that old idler wheel hub that will allow proper operation on the other 3 speeds, I might go back in this, but chances of that are really not that great. This is probably going to be one that the next time I have a eBay clean out, this is probably going to go up for sale for whatever I can get for it, enough to cover my expenses, hopefully. Alright, there you go. It's done. I'm through with this, and we should have some more in-depth stuff after Christmas. So with that said, I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and looking forward to some good things taking place in 2020.